folks, Justin at Vintage 55 Restorations again. Got another episode of Vintage 55 Garage for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at my shop truck. It's a 66 F250 3/4 ton, and real popular truck back in its day, now actually too, but I liked it so much I bought it twice, so I'll tell you that story later. But anyway, so it's a 66, like I said, 3/4 ton, and this is the 4th generation. Anybody that knows anything about these trucks, first off, will go, it's not a 66, it's a 65. It's just a 65 grill that I've put onto it. I like grill swapping. I usually hate whatever year truck or car I got its grill, and I like to change it. Keep people guessing a little bit, I guess. But anyway, so it's got a 65 aluminum grill, which was an option. It's got a chrome bumper, which was an option. Fog lights I added. That being said, it's a 4th generation, which you know, the trucks started in '48 with F1, and then they became F100. I have another video of a 1955 F100, which is another truck I own, and that is you know, a couple generations before. That's the 2nd generation. This is the 4th. 4th generation started in 62 with I think it was 62 with the unibody truck. People didn't like it, so they changed it, and 63 looks really similar to this. 64 real similar to this, but the big change was in 64 they came out with a brand new chassis and frame, which basically the original chassis and frame before 64 went almost all the way back to the beginning of the F-Series truck. It was a solid axle in the front, straight axle, and handled like a train. And so when they came out with the 64, they changed it to a more of a car type suspension. It was called the Twin I-Beam suspension. If you look on the truck, this is your giveaway for a very, very late 64, which is like the last month of 64. They came out in October. And 65, 66, those are all Twin I-Beam. The frame actually continued on a long time after that, but even with the body changing. But anyway, that was the big thing: 64, 65, 66, Twin I-Beam suspension, and that was basically your front wheels connected to a big I-Beam, and this front wheel is connected to a big I-Beam, and they cross and you get this motion going on, which dramatically improves the ride and handling and all that. And I can say that firsthand. I've got a truck with the frame before this one, and I got this one, and it's just total difference. So quick walk around as I tell you some of the other things. This is custom cab trim. It didn't have it originally, and there's not supposed to be screws through it. The trim that I actually found, it's real hard to find. The trim that I found already had screw holes in it, so I just decided to just put the screws back into it. And that being said, I'm still looking for the rear one, if anybody out there has them. Specifically long bed. This is a long bed. They did come in short beds also, but I need the long bed trim. But 65, they also came out with a crew cab model for the first time, which this is not, obviously, but and that's with the 2nd set of doors. I'm looking for one of those. That's one of my dream list cars. But that was a big thing. Before that, any crew cabs were made by outside coach makers, and basically they're made for like lumberjacks and railroad companies, things like that needed multiple guys in a truck at once. But in 65, they started coming from the factory. There was also a camper special model, which a lot of people think this is, and there were lots of camper specials that got sold. That's just beefed up with heavier components, suspension-wise, brake-wise. They're nice. Like I said, they're just kind of beefier of the same model, but this is not a camper special. Although it did have a camper on it at one point. I rebuilt a slide-in cab-over camper, and we took it camping a couple times with that. But the reason they came out with a camper special model was because those were getting so popular at the time. Extra things. It's got tow mirrors, I do a lot of towing with it. Lots of tie-down hooks inside the bed are the heavier duty ones. These are just kind of for rope. White walls, obviously. This truck actually originally had 3 gas tanks. One behind the cab, or behind the bench, which fills up here. That's the main one, and that's the only one I use. And it covers up behind the bench covers it up. It's behind the bench. The Ranger model or trim package that is so known today actually originated with these trucks, and part of the Ranger trim package was bucket seats and a curtain that covered that gas tank, because then you could see the gas tank in between the bucket seats. So literally the infamous Ranger trim package started as basically a curtain over a gas tank. But anyway, this had 3 gas tanks, one on each side and one internally, and you could switch over between the 3. Obviously it was meant to be a work truck and tow things for long distances. Large hubcaps, and that covers the big axle in the back. Those are the only ones that cover it, the hubs. It's got the work bumper, which I actually do use. It's got the tow hitch integral into the bumper, which takes enough weight for everything I use. Reverse lights that I've put into it. The paint, actually, I should bring that up real quick. It's two-tone. This truck originally was two-tone in these colors, the same colors, but the body brake was different. So instead of braking here and here, the 66 originally it was all this color, granted very faded, and the very little cap of the roof was white. You'll notice there's no drip rails on this. That's because when I got this, there was no metal here at all. It was 2 inches of empty space, with the front disconnected completely and the other side having 2 inches of empty space. The back was the only seam that was still intact. It was actually flapping on the way home, completely disengaged from the cab. So needless to say, the rain gutters didn't make it. When I patched them, I just patched them in with solid steel. Okay, let's walk around this way still. You can see, obviously, I use it every day. I use it hard. It's got a freezer in it now. This is my ramp that I use to put everything up into it. Bed is obviously pretty trashed, and it will continue to be trashed. This paint job is pretty new. It's only I think a couple months old, and single stage paint. I wanted it two-tone again, and I wanted it nice enough. But like I said, I do beat this thing up. This was a quick paint job. This is the 3rd gas tank that I was talking about, but it no longer goes anywhere. It's just an empty door. I had to remove that gas tank to put this in, which is a utility pocket. And I was looking for one of those for about 6 months, trying to find one. That utility pocket only fits on this body style bed, so it's only a couple years and pretty hard to find because it fits that curve. But more importantly, it fits the inside. It actually tucks around the frame and literally takes up as much room internally as it possibly can, so it can bolt onto the frame and get as much space out of it. But as I said, it's a utility pocket, and this is where I keep all my tie downs, my gloves, and my back brace, and everything an old man needs to load refrigerators into a truck. And it's nice because it's just really easy accessible. I do have a box in the bed, but that's where I carry tools, a spare battery, gallon of gas, all the stuff that hopefully I shouldn't have to get to, but I usually do on the side of the freeway. But it's stuff that I can lock up and leave locked up. This is the stuff I need to access every day while I'm working with this truck. Externally, that's kind of everything that this has. Internally, there's a couple odd things about it, I guess. It's got a stereo that the previous owner put in, and I just left because I do use it. The glove box is just a basic glove box. I've added this little cage cup holder, utility holder, and this 12-volt fan that is wonderful in the summertime and aims right at me. The dash was originally padded. It had about 1 inch of foam on it. It was a safety dash, and you could get it with or without. It was an option, so it shows how much of a difference it made. If you I forget what video it is, one of the other previous videos I'd mentioned the international one. I mentioned the dash pad on it. Most of those early dash pads, when they were first making the transition, you could get them with or without, which means you could tear that ugly dash pad off and there's a nice steel dash underneath, which was the case here. So I pulled that off, scraped all the glue, sanded it down, painted it two-tone like the exterior. Yeah, it looks a heck of a lot better. We'll go to the other side and check out the driver's side. Like I said, the suspension and the chassis and everything was new for the year before this. The powertrain was relatively new. You could get it with a 6 or an 8, and the 300 inline 6 would have been what was kind of the base model, which had a decent amount of torque. This year, though, they came out with the 352, which was a big boy V8 FE block. They were based off of a Edsel, actually, Ford Edsel FE, and they came into both of those cars. Edsel, you know, if you guys know the story, was pretty much aborted instantly, but that E still marks a lot of different parts, Comet parts. A lot of early Comet parts have an E in them because Comet was supposed to be part of Edsel. But little E's that still stuck around with the design of different things, but that being one of them. Anyway, the 352 block eventually was bored out to be a 360, 390. There's one bigger than that too, but 390 is kind of the one everybody knows it for. This is not a 390, it is a 352. I know that because the head gasket blew. I took it apart and then I could check it. Everybody sells a 390, but most of them are not 390s. If it was this early, it was a 352, and it originally came with 208 horsepower, which is the first time that a motor came from the factory over 200 horsepower in these trucks, which was kind of a big deal. Torque was always more important than horsepower, though, when it comes to trucks. Honestly, still is, but they got it over 200 horsepower. That was a good selling point for them. So this side, we got some cool stuff. Obviously, the steering wheel has a nice horn ring on it. That was an option as well. The stick has a topper that Lucky Burton up in Hollywood made for me. Full set of gauges, including a fuel economy gauge, which is a vacuum gauge. It's kind of neat. It tells you basically this is power range, but coasting range, and it tells you you're, you know, obviously the farther this way, the better gas mileage you're getting. It doesn't tell you the numbers because it doesn't want you to know the numbers, but you know, your choke, your horn, your wipers, lights, all that regular stuff in here. And my switch down here for my fan. Like I said, it is stick. It's a 4-speed on the floor, obviously, with a granny gear low, which is really, really low. You can pull a stump out of the ground with it. Driving every day, I started in second. I've used first gear twice, ever, and that was fully loaded, going up almost a 40-degree grade, and it's a real low gear. That being said, reverses that same low gear, so it does not go it does not go backwards very quickly. So for all intents and purposes, it's a 3-speed. But like I said, it does drive well. It you know, it likes to go 60 on the freeway, so it's a little bit slow, but it keeps up well. Around town, it's great because it gets off the line perfectly fast because of all the torque, but it doesn't have a lot of high end. It's geared for low end and for towing stuff. So this particular truck, that's kind of the history of 66 Ford truck. Other than this was the last body style of that generation, so 67 got really boxy. I don't remember if it's dent side or bump side, but it's a squared off thing, and there's a big kind of body line that goes down the middle. I believe bump side was first. It had a little bulge, and then they changed it to concave, and there was a hole instead, so bump side, dent side, big changes. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of the history of these trucks. Now the history of this truck is much more interesting than that. So I bought this, I went looking for a a truck for my shop, to be a dedicated shop truck. As I mentioned before, I have the 55 F100 that I was using as a truck. I always have, but it's a short bed. It's got a 302 in it. It's not a truck, and I move refrigerators all day long, so and tow trailers, and so I needed something a little bit more. So I started looking for a truck, something cheap, but old, something cool, and I came across one of these on Craigslist, and it was $1,000. Actually, I think it was $1,200, and so I went to go look at it. And if you care to see what it looked like originally, you can go on my Instagram and look. There's some a ways back, but anyway, I got down there, looked at this thing in Long Beach, and it was a mess. It was very much a a project, I guess you would say. It was a claptrap, but it was everything was falling off of it, and it was barely running. It was running though. That was the biggest thing that I wanted, was something running. I could go from there. But so I get there, and like I said, all of this metal was completely gone. That was coming off completely. The back was barely hanging on. Half the stuff didn't work. Tires were bald. It ran okay though. It ran okay. So I talked the guy down to $1,000 instead of $1,200, and and the paperwork was terrible. There was no paper trail, but I got that worked out later. But which is why it was so cheap at $1,200. But and the rust was a big deterrent. And actually, if you ever look for this generation of truck, that section right there is always rusted out. They're very hard to find without that rust. Good thing is it's pretty easily patchable. But so anyway, I go down there, meet this guy. It's this old Mexican man, and I asked him how long he'd owned it, because I'm walking around it and looking at it, and it's got a Yosemite Sam air freshener hanging from the steering wheel. Whatever. It's got a gun rack, which I left, if you haven't noticed. It had an NRA sticker, a Proud to be an American sticker, mud flaps, and it had a big sticker on the back bumper that said white trash. And I said, how long have you owned this truck? And he said, oh, about 2 years I drive it. So this guy was driving this truck for 2 years with white trash written across the back of it. Anyway, I thought it was funny. But so anyway, I buy it from him and drive off, and 2 blocks away the radiator explodes, just everywhere. Top of the radiator seam, it split. It starts pouring antifreeze all over the place. And I literally just turned around, parked it in front of his shop, with antifreeze leaking everywhere. I'm like, hey dude, like, you said you drive it all the time and the radiator blows up half a block away from here. You're not driving this all the time. Which I knew the radiator was, if it's an old radiator and you're getting a car for the for the first time, you want to replace the radiator. It's pretty integral. But half a block for something that's been driven regularly, I knew he was full of it when it came to that. But anyway, so I blew the radiator up half a block away. And I think that distance is shrinking over the span of this story. But anyway, it really was like less than a mile away. So I pull back up and I go, hey, the radiator exploded. Like, I just Googled the radiators and they're like $200. Like, he's like, well, you want to buy it and you wanted to buy it. And I'm like, I still want to buy it, but like, that's $200 out of my pocket already, And he's like, so if I give you $200, you'll still buy it? I was like, yeah. So he hands me $200, and I drive off with the radiator leaking all over the place. My dad lived a couple miles away, so I nursed it over there and left it for the weekend. But so I ended up getting the thing for $800, and that's a good story. But it sounds more impressive than it was, because, like I said, everything was falling apart on it. But anyway, over the course of the next 2 years or so, I got it mechanically very, very sound. Lots of stuff got replaced, just kind of as needed, and stuff that I knew needed to be replaced. But then the head gasket blew, which I didn't know, other than a bit of smoke started coming out of the tailpipe, and gauges were all fine. And so I checked checked it. I don't know how long I was driving around with a little bit of smoke. It wasn't noticeable enough, but I checked it, and the head gasket was leaking. There was antifreeze getting in the oil, and so I pulled the giant cast iron intake, and took everything apart, and it had broken one of the push rods in half and bent another one. No power loss, nothing wrong on the gauges, no anything. And so I'm sold on this FE block. We put one in the Lincoln. I will swear by this block. It is just the toughest thing ever. So anyway, I got it home, used it for a couple years as our first shop truck for vintage 55 restorations, and then I decided I wanted to get the step van, which there's another video on that, 61 Grumman van. And so I bought that, got it on the road, and then once I was driving it regularly, this was kind of redundant. We had too many trucks, and so I put this on the market. It didn't look this good at that point. It was still cosmetically pretty dumpy, but I had fixed the rust, which that was an adventure in itself. I ended up catching the roof on fire, but everything's good now. It's a story for another time. But anyway, so I sold it. Like I said, cosmetically it was pretty rough still, but it was sealed. It wasn't rusty anymore. It looked like an old farm truck, and everybody loved it as it was with the patina. But I wanted something nicer, for a shop truck. But so anyway, so I sold the truck and started driving the van, fixed the van up completely, and drove around for another couple years with the van. But I got sick of driving that every day. It's like a school bus, and kind of takes its toll on you in terms of it going 50 miles an hour and being in a captain's chair. And it was geared even lower than this is, and it had a little 6 in it, and everybody flips you off and honks at you on the freeway because you're going too slow. And my sciatica was really bad from sitting in a captain's chair doing this all day. And I wanted a truck back just to drive a truck. I don't need an enclosed van every day for my shop. I need a pickup truck most days. Really, I only need something enclosed if it's raining or if I'm vending in a market. So I bought a cargo trailer that we're in the process of fixing up to match the truck and look old, and it's really cool. I'll probably do a video on that too. And so I started looking for another shop truck to replace the van. And so I sold the van and went to Arizona, and that week I was looking at trucks, and I went and looked at a couple trucks, and basically everybody, rebuilt engine, runs great. Never know whether or not that's true. One I almost pulled the trigger on was a 65, and it did run great, but the gauges were showing me something, and so I ran a compression test on it, and they were all it was on its last leg, even though it drove great. So I passed on that one. So I was sad. I was looking at a couple different trucks. I was looking at the third gen Fords, and I was looking at more 65, 66s because I liked my old one so much. And that same week, the guy I sold the truck to, who lived 2 miles away from me, called me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling your old truck. He told me to call you if I decided to sell it because you want to be there first." And so I was like, okay, yeah, why are you selling it? He said, "We're just not driving it. We've had it for 2 years, and we drove it twice, put 20 miles on it. I think they just like the idea of an old truck more than actually driving one. It doesn't, stick on the floor, no power steering, no power brakes. I'm used to that though. That's what I drive all the time. It was an upgrade from driving the van every day. But so anyway, he calls me and he goes, "Yeah, I'm thinking about selling it." I said, "Oh, really?" And so I said, "I'll come get it right now." So I go down there, and I ended up paying him less than what he bought it for, and I drove it off. And the only thing that had happened in the meantime was the master brake diaphragm had cracked, and so the brakes were a little squishy, so I just replaced that. But then I started using it the next day. And so since I sold the van to buy a truck, I was planning on getting a nicer truck cosmetically a nicer truck than what this was when I sold it. But I got it for a good price, and so I had some money left over, so I got white walls, and I did the paint, and I changed the grill, got a headliner kit, and got hubcaps and trim, and of dressed it up a little bit. I bought the truck a new suit, and still came in right at my budget that I wanted to. But the truck I knew was good mechanically. Literally the week before I sold it to him, I drove it up to Big Bear for my friend's bachelor party, and we took it off-roading up there. And by off-roading, I mean got it sideways and Dukes of Hazzard style, you know, hopping it in the air. But so I knew it was, and then I just drove back down the mountain. So I knew it was mechanically, you know, real solid. I just wanted something nicer cosmetically, so I spent the next month getting it nice, which incidentally was when we were moving the shop. It was a crazy month, but yeah, I love this truck, and it's been real good to me, real good to us. Our business was pretty much built on the back of this thing, and it's nice to have it back, even just to know that it's being used for what it's supposed to. So I got a request from somebody else that watches these videos that they want to hear these things started up and running, because I just realized that I've never done that in the videos. So, well, probably because half of them aren't running when I take the videos, but so anyway, I believe his words were so that you can see the quirks of starting an old vehicle. There usually are, and this one is actually really nice and doesn't require many quirks. You know what, now that I think of it, there are quirks, I'm just used to them. So the choke is reverse on the carburetor, because I had to put a different carb arm on there to make it work. So all the way out is choke off. So the choke has to be completely on, obviously not in gear. And everybody thinks this is a starter button up here, like in my 55, which has a starter button right there. It's not a starter button, it's actually wiper wash fluid that is not hooked up and never will be, because who needs that? But anyway, it's just a turn and a couple pumps, and it's good. This is probably the most simple of all our cars to start, but you can hear all that 208 horsepower in there. But real nice and smooth. Like I said, this thing runs great, and